I actually ended up going to college to be a mechanical engineering major. And the reason why is that not having known anything about college or why, what to do there, I applied to one of the few colleges I'd ever heard of, which was a predominantly engineering and agricultural school. And I had told my brother that, psychology sounds really interesting. I've never taken a class, but I think I'd really like that. And my brother, who was, all of 25 years old and super wise, not wise, he said, psychology is for dumb chicks. And so, not being a dumb chick, I decided that I would switch it up and become a mechanical engineer because it would gain respect in my family of origin.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Weekly Bustle. This is another great episode coming up because I'm here with a professor of psychology all the way from UC Berkeley, right? Just so,
That's
just
right.
so, just so,
Yeah.
because this person has been teaching left, right, and center that I sometimes don't know where does it go, and she'll be telling us everything about why that is so. So, Melissa, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Happy winter to you all.
Happy winter to everybody, and it's the festive
Happy winter.
season. It's the festive weekend coming up, I think. Is it a long weekend there in the States or not?
It is. Yeah, Christmas is a huge holiday in the US, and Christmas falls on a Monday this year, so it will be a long weekend.
A long weekend, and I'm sure you're pretty excited for it.
I'm ready.
You're ready.
Everything is wrapped, everything is decorated. Now I just get to enjoy it.
Ah, that's beautiful. So, Melissa,
Yeah.
you teach psychology. You are on a university level. Offline, we already talked about it, that I'm already a big fan. I want to know everything about the academic life. I wanted to go into it myself, but yeah, life happened, so that we'll park that aside for now. But I want to know your journey. Who is Melissa? Where did it start? How did it start? There's certain interesting stories that I've heard about a little bit from what we talked about, but the listeners haven't. So why don't you walk us through who is Melissa?
Sure. Well, I guess I'll start out by saying that I was born and raised in Sacramento, which is the capital of California in the US. And I'm the youngest of three kids. And I come from a really working class background. My parents met almost 50 years ago now, working in a factory together. They worked in a book bindery. So, where a factory where they bind the book pages together.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, my parents invested a lot in education. And it was a high value in my family because having not come from a background where they could afford education, they really promoted education among their kids. So as a result of that, I was the first to go to college in my family. I was first to get a graduate degree in my family, to get a master's degree, to get a PhD, and have had a really circuitous path to that as a result of not having a lot of mentorship or guidance in the process. So I actually ended up going to college to be a mechanical engineering major. And the reason why is that not having known anything about college or why, what to do there, I applied to one of the few colleges I'd ever heard of, which was a predominantly engineering and agricultural school. And I had told my brother that, psychology sounds really interesting. I've never taken a class, but I think I'd really like that. And my brother, who was, all of 25 years old and super wise, not wise, he said, psychology is for dumb chicks. And so, not being a dumb chick, I decided that I would switch it up and become a mechanical engineer because it would gain respect in my family of origin. So I went to one of the best engineering schools in the US to study mechanical engineering. And I started doing that and I was passing my classes and all, but I really hated it. It was just a drag. It wasn't interesting. It was something I had to force myself to do and make progress on. Um, well, anyway, so I found myself taking other classes because I was not interested in my formal path. And I ended up in a psychology one class, like the general psychology class. And how the school taught that course is that they allowed the faculty, each faculty member, to give one lecture on their area of expertise. And so it was kind of like TED Talks before TED Talks existed, where every faculty member is trying to be more interesting than the other one. So it was the best class I think I've ever taken in my life, ever, because it was this challenge to the faculty to be like, entertaining and to create applied science and to give us a background in psychology. Anyway, and so it was one of the first times where I was hungry for the material. I thought this is the most interesting stuff I have ever heard of. And I'm in and I'm interested. And I kind of think of my relationship to psychology with the following metaphor. So I used to, or I still have a very close friend who's an art professor. And I don't have a background
Wow.
in art. I don't know much
Wow.
about art,
I love
right?
the fact that you guys like you, or even your friend circle is all professors. You're like, "Oh, I have a
Well,
friend who's a
so
professor."
so I have a lot of friends who are professors. Yeah. So he's an art professor, and we used to go to art gallery openings together. And he would teach me, Missy, if you look at this, you can tell that the artist was going for this effect, or that this relates to this part of history in the world, or whatever. Like, there's just ways that he could teach me how to see the art that I otherwise was just incapable of having a depth of knowledge to really see. And the study of psychology is like teaching someone how to see art, or how to taste wine, or how to be a connoisseur of foods, right? With psychology, it's like, how do you be a connoisseur of human interaction, human process, human thought, your own behaviors? I mean, psychology is the best subject ever. I am obsessed. So I ended up in the right place despite my brother's nonsensical dismissal of the field. Um,
But
yeah,
I would
yeah.
like to add a little bit there. I get where your brother was coming from to an extent. Why?
Mm,
Because in my universities, masters, bachelors, wherever I used to go, the most male to female ratio would always be in engineering, the
mm,
most guys, of course, right?
mm,
And in
mm-hmm,
psychology, the most girls.
mm-hmm.
So it would be the completely
True.
opposite. So these are where biases and stereotypes come in from, right? So like you see this and then you look at it and you go like, this is my sample size is so huge apparently that I can make this claim. But that's basically
Mm,
how it starts. You look at your university and you go like, I don't think this is the right decision. My family was the same. I started in mathematics.
mm, mm.
And from mathematics, we went into economics to econometrics, econometrics to data science. So yeah, it is what it is, right? You're trying to
Mm,
find your way. So we
mm,
are at
mhm.
university at one of the best engineering colleges. From there, you get inspired by a TED Talk for academics with your art
Basically.
teacher. Now you switch to
Mm,
psychology. So now you're
mhm.
studying psychology. But you still did not become a professor. Like that was not your end goal, right? You were just studying psychology. So when did that switch happen? Because there was something in the middle that happened.
Yeah, there's something in the middle. So while I was in undergrad, I had this opportunity to study abroad. And the opportunity I chose to study abroad was actually with the Navy, with the U.S. Navy. So there's a university called the California Maritime Academy, and it's one of our maritime institutions. There are very few of them, maybe even just one or two maritime institutions. Anyway, they have an old Navy explorer ship that they use as a training project for students. And so I studied on this ship for a number of months and traveled around the South Pacific Rim. And anyway, and as a result of that, I noticed that I really love being away from everything in the world. I like the
Okay.
isolation and the connection with nature that happens from being at sea. And so when I finished my undergrad work, I decided to I applied and was accepted to become actually an entertainer on cruise ships. So I traveled around on cruise ships for a bit, but actually decided to switch out of that because it was an extremely racist and classist experience.
Ooh, I would like to know a little bit more
Yeah,
about that. But before we do that,
yeah.
what does entertainer mean in a cruise ship?
Yeah, yeah. So on cruise ships, you have some entertainers that are with the cruise company itself, and you have others that are contracted. So the
Yeah.
contracted people are like a magician who's there for the week, or like a particular musician or artist or something who's there for
Yeah.
the week.
Yeah.
Or you have the staff ones who like live on the ship for months at a shot. I was one of those. And
Yeah.
so it would switch every week. So it could be teaching line dancing. It could be taking teenagers white water rafting through Alaska, which I did. It could
Wow.
be, yeah, sports, or hosting trivia hours or something, and anything within the realm of entertainment. My favorite being, yeah, line dancing, probably. Actually, the outdoorsy things are really interesting too. You
Oh,
know,
that's
going
beautiful.
whitewater rafting was lovely, yeah, and mountain biking, things like that. Like that was the
You have no
entertainment.
idea.
So
One of my
quite an array.
dreams, yeah, one of my dreams is to actually go on a cruise ship and experience nature on the sea because I think I'm
Mm,
gonna love it. But none of the people around me are ready to commit. They're like,
yeah,
a
yeah.
few days on the sea, I don't believe it. I'm like, I think it's gonna be fun. Let's try it. But my wife is like, no, I don't think so. Ahad. I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm like, hey, we need to try it before we can say no.
Well, then you'll
So
then you'll know. Yeah,
then
maybe
you'll
bring a
know.
book in case she doesn't like it. Bring something else, to have ensure the good times. Bring some
Ensure
little
they could.
insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you did that for a while. So you were an
Mm,
entertainer before you started your master's program then. What happened with the racist and classist issues that were happening on the cruise ship?
sure, happy to talk about that. Yeah, okay. So many of the major cruise companies are owned by the same corporation. Like the top seven are owned by this one mega organization. And that organization has a tendency in their hiring practices to hire for specific roles from specific countries. So a lot of the times when you go on a cruise from one of these major seven players, a lot of the times the people who cook your food are going to be from the Philippines. A lot of the time, the people who are in charge of hotel services, so cabin stewards who make your bed and clean your bathrooms and all that, they tend to be from Indonesia. And the entertainment staff tends to be from the US or Canada or Australia. And then the people who run the ship, like the captain and the bosun and the first mate, second mate, all of that, they are hired from the place where the ship is registered. So, for example, Holland America is registered in the Netherlands, and so their, captain, etc., they're Dutch,
Yeah.
right? On the Netherlands, yeah. And so, why it is racist is because the rights pertaining to the different departments vary
Yeah.
in extreme ways, right? So not just in terms of compensation, but even behind the scenes, what you're allowed to do, what you're allowed to participate in, and it's extremely different.
Yeah.
So that might look like, which groups are flown out to meet the ship when they start their contract versus which groups have to pay for their own ticket to join the ship to get on the crew. Or when you have a ship that is docked somewhere, a certain proportion of the people a certain proportion of the capacity of that vessel needs to remain on the ship. It's a maritime law, for the reduction of piracy. So someone has to like physically babysit the ship by sitting on it. And if you're from some of the departments and you're in a port, you can get off and do whatever you want. And if you're from other departments, you have to stay and babysit the ship.
Yeah.
And then you add things like compensation. You add things like, where do you eat? Do you eat in the passenger areas, or do you eat like at the bottom of the ship in your own little kitchen that you're not allowed to leave? Or in the entertainment that the staff have access to, are all staff allowed to it? No. So the people who run the deck department and the people who are the entertainment departments, so US, Canada, Netherlands, Australia, they can hang out and party after hours if they want to. But if you're Indonesian or Filipino, you're not allowed in the bar.
Yeah.
Tell
Yeah.
me that's not racist and classist,
Yeah. Yeah. I get
right?
it. I
So
get
it
it.
is extremely problematic. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so go ahead.
I used to live. I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia. So there also you have this quite common concept that the working staff in the house is usually East Asian, Philippine or
Mm-hmm.
Indonesian. Of course, a lot of us there are labor, Pakistani, Indians, Bengali, and uh, and the Saudis are just chilling. It's a welfare. Technically, it's a welfare state, so they get money to do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They sell the
Mm.
oil and they tell the people that here's your share of all the oil revenue we're making. So the Saudis didn't even
Wow.
need to work. So basically, it was
Mm.
running by immigrants, and then the whole thing happened. And even now in the Middle East, right now I've become a Dutch citizen. So my brother works in Dubai, and he told me, "Why don't you apply to the Middle East?" I said, "There is no point. I have a very good, comfortable life." He's like, "No, you have a Dutch passport. So if you
Mm.
apply, you probably will get a really good compensation package compared to if you would apply with a Pakistani passport." I said,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
sure, but I'm still not white. And then I,
Hmm.
I asked my colleague, and he said, yeah, if I apply, he's white. He said, I apply, I'm going to get a much better package in Dubai than you
Right.
can. And
Right.
I'm like, so
Hmm.
imagine for us, our whole world was like a cruise ship when we were we were growing up. And
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
so interesting to see how these things happen everywhere, and it's not just one section of the population of the world, but even multiple different sections of the population of the world do this. Even in Japan, immigration is very, very low, and if it is, it's mostly
Hmm.
blue collar immigration. So they only let
Hmm.
people in to do the labor work, because the rest of the work the Japanese want to do themselves. So this is pretty interesting. Thank you so much for sharing, Melissa, but you were saying something else before I digressed a little bit.
No, no, first, I mean, I love talking about these concepts and also just outing them as things that are happening in the world. I think that conceptually, a lot of Americans at least think that they are actively anti-racist, right? Or they're actively anti-classism, but they may not even necessarily notice that that's what's happening, right, in their environments. So I appreciate talking about this. Yeah, so I because cruise ships are super racist, I quit. I quit after
Yeah.
my first contract. Um, which is not to say I don't do entertaining things still, but I'll tell about that later if you have interest.
Oh, I would like to listen to
Yeah,
that. Yes, indeed.
yeah, I still do entertaining things,
Yeah.
and have had, yeah, anyway, mostly musical things.
Oh,
But yeah, so I transitioned out of that to working in the nonprofit mental health sector. So I started out, I mean, I was probably 21. I started out as a temp at a community mental health organization. And then within maybe a month or two, got promoted majorly to the head of a major gifts campaign. So from being a filing clerk to mostly because I was obnoxious and had high standards. And I was disappointed by what was happening currently in the organization and told the CEO that much. So anyway, he said, "Oh, you think that there's a problem here? Well, fine, it's your job." And so at 21 or something, 22 maybe, became in charge of a major gift campaign, and then eventually was in charge of a multi-million dollar nonprofit merger also at 22. And it was a merger between organizations that focus on mental health care. One of them was a long-standing addictions treatment organization, and then the other one did suicide prevention, child abuse treatment and prevention, HIV support, that sort of stuff. And so there was this large merger of these two nonprofits, and I did, just prior to graduate school, all of the due diligence procedures and recommendations for a merger, which is a bizarre bit of experience at
I
that
can
age or ever
imagine.
really. But yeah, yeah.
So you are now reaching graduate school, and then the path is clear. You studied, you did your master's, you did your PhD, and then you started working, or there's something else interesting that has happened during this process?
Yeah, I would say there's some more interesting things. So when I was working on graduate school, um, I really found that I missed the direct services and direct impact you have of working in the community. So I really appreciated everything that I learned in graduate school, especially statistics and research skills. I love that stuff. I'm a real dork, like big time dork. um, but I missed the feeling that I had working at the nonprofit, where I could tell that if I tried really hard, I can make a difference in my community. I can get access to services for people who are disenfranchised, people who are really suffering from mental illness or from addictions. And in graduate school, it just seemed too distant from real life and people's realities and how community should operate. And so probably in my third year of graduate school, and I skipped my master's degree actually, and so I went directly from my bachelor's to a PhD program. And maybe in my third year of that, I went back to doing direct services and started with teen pregnancy prevention and intervention. And then eventually, because there was a massive shooting in Sacramento that happened between some different gang groups, and in that massive shooting, there was a woman who was shielding her 2-year-old at the time and was murdered as a result of people missing. People who are aiming at each other missed and hit her, right? And so, in response to that, our city was outraged, and they decided to create a gang prevention task force. And the mayor, who was at the time Kevin Johnson, a very famous basketball player in the U.S., he made it his top priority to have gang violence intervention. So I actually ended up taking on the Sacramento Violence Intervention Program and did, you know, violence intervention and prevention work, and was a specialist in that for a good 5 years or so before moving on to academia full time. I always had one foot in teaching, but was doing work with shot, stabbed, and assaulted kids for a large part of that part of my career.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's amazing. I think this is a very, very interesting topic to me as well, because a lot of times we feel like we want to make the world a better place, but we're not actively doing anything in our community.
Mm.
We want to do
Oh.
something outside of our community. Right now, the world is a very messy place. A lot of things are happening, and a lot of people are coping with it in their own manner. But what I still don't see is a reluctance to help within your community, because you feel like you don't need a difference, especially in developed states. The United States
Mm-hmm.
is one of the most developed countries in the world, but there's also like a difference in, for example, in Europe, you have a much safer security net, I would say. So here, a lot of people, when I talk to them, why don't you help out in your community? The answer is always is, why would you? No one is, there's no problem here. Everyone is okay. No one can be homeless. No
Yeah.
one can be poor. There's like the social security net is great. And I'm like, yeah, but if you look outside, you still see people on the road, people addicted to drugs. You can still make a
Mm-hmm.
difference, loneliness,
Mm-hmm.
but we want to go in the
Mm-hmm.
completely at the end of the world. My wife and
Mm-hmm.
I both are immigrants. She's Afghan, I'm Pakistani, so we have our biases. My mom always tells me, why don't you send money here? We can help out the people in Pakistan. And I'm like, yeah, but I can also help out the people here if I want to. So
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to make the story out is, I want to hear from you. Why were you so interested in making a difference in your community, and why do you think that is important?
Yeah. Why was I so interested in it? Well, probably a number of things. You know, I come from a background educationally and religiously that is about community service and social justice. So, you know, I grew up in a very strangely progressive Catholic school that taught me not Catholicism, but global religions, meditation, you know, social systems and the problems with social systems and the way that people are harmed by various social systems. So I'm already looking at the world through the filter of what I was raised with. Having, you know, I had nuns who worked at our school who would chain themselves in protest of war to Air Force bases. So this is not the typical Catholic school experience for
Yeah.
anybody, but nonetheless, so my motivation probably happens to be in part because injustice and need is so obvious to me. I'm like, there's a need there, there's a need there, there's a need there. It's as obvious as what color shirt are you wearing? Like, well, you're wearing a white shirt. I don't have to think about it. It's obvious, right? And so there's that. Another thing is there's a sense of kind of moral obligation to be supportive and helpful, I think. But another is that when we engage in our communities, when we make an investment, just like anything else, when we invest in our job, when we invest in our relationships, our romantic partnerships, or in our parenting or whatever, the investment has a return on it, which is a sense of connection, belonging, and a feeling of being able to have influence on the world. When we feel like we can't influence the world at all, it leads to things like learned helplessness and depression. And so, actively investing in one another is one way to feed our own spirits, as well as helping our community be more of the ideal that we're aiming for. So, both.
I really like the last point that you said about how you help and make something in your community, like make something happen in your community to feed your own soul. So there's research after
Mm,
research that says that if you feel lonely or if you feel bad, the best thing you can do is offer help to someone else, and that
totally.
makes you feel.
Mm-hmm.
So I never understood. Well, of course, I was also raised in a very proto-Muslim environment, right? And our basis is always community and help each other out, and the love is always
Mm-hmm.
there.
Mm-hmm.
So I always saw the value of community till an extent, I'll be honest, because
Mm-hmm.
individualistic societies are built differently. Not communist, but communal societies are built differently. So for us,
Mm-hmm.
community was also like all the way to our throats sometimes. So we did love it.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
love our family. We love everyone around us. But come on, like I would like to have my own space a little bit.
Right. I
So
don't need them touching me all the time. Yeah.
yeah, it is quite normal. Touching me, I never
Mm,
had. I'll
mm,
I'll, I'll be honest with us. I never had my own room till I
mm,
moved out
mhm,
to go to Turkey to study. So till the age of 18,
mhm,
I never had my own room in my own house
mm,
because we were like four
mm,
kids. So my sister got her own room because she was the only sister. So of course she was the only girl in the house, so she gets a room. My older brother was sharing with my grandmother. My mom and dad had their own room, and one was a living room or a drawing room, as we used to call it. And so me and my little brother were just hopping around. Sometimes my little brother would sleep with my sister. I would go sleep on the floor in my mom's room, or the other way around, and that was my life. So
Yeah.
sometimes you go like, you know what? I would really enjoy that little bit of individualism and have my own life because I'm so tired of
Yeah,
this
that
community. But
seems reasonable.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But I
Yeah.
do get it. I get that, and that's what I first thing I noticed here when I moved here 5 years ago was how individualistic everyone here is. And I was like, okay, but hey, what about getting together? Where is that thing? And the Dutch, Northern Europeans are notoriously more individualistic, so than Southern Europeans. So it's also extra
Mhm.
out there. You go out there, everyone is walking their own way, biking their own way, and you're like, hey, but and it's cold. When it's
Oh.
cold, you want to be with people. And when I come here, the first thing I'm telling my wife, I'm like, okay, let's gather a community. And now it's been 5 years, and I'm slowly building my community, and it's mostly expats because the Dutch people
Oh,
are not understanding
sure.
this. They're in their own world, but
Mhm,
I
mhm,
really value community, and I really appreciate what you've been doing
mhm,
so far. And I think it's
mm.
wonderful to be part of it. So the real question is, are you still involved after going into academia, doing a little bit of this community outreach, or you are too busy researching and building labs and doing all of that stuff?
Yeah, I would say I'm still involved in community, but not in the same way that I was.
Yeah.
So when I stopped doing gang violence work, it was about a year afterward that it was actually the summer of 2016. There was a movement in the U.S. whereby for the first time police officers were required to wear body cameras, and that body camera footage was made public. And so in the summer of 2016, it's when in the US it became very obvious that there were not infrequent incidences of young people of color being shot by police officers.
Yeah.
And so they had this footage on the news. And as a result of seeing that footage, a lot of PTSD from having worked in gang violence intervention, working with shot, stabbed, and assaulted kids arose in me that I didn't know. It was kind of latent because when you're doing that work, you're using a lot of adrenaline, like, and that provides some sort of safety net. Like, there's a lot to focus on as well. Like, there's not enough time to really check in with how you're affected because there's someone who needs something, and you could really easily divert your attention to that other person. But anyway, after I had been away from that for about a year and then got this flood of trauma that I had acquired from doing that work, which I have now worked out and now it's gone. But that being said, I think I have retired from that particular line of work. But that being said, I have still done counseling and coaching the entire time. I have a private executive coaching practice that is extremely psychologically informed. So I use a lot of theory. I pull on my knowledge from different skill sets and life experiences. It gets pretty dorky in my executive coaching sessions with, CEOs and whoever, C-suite people, and also individual contributors. A lot of people in tech, a lot of artists also are drawn to me for various reasons.
Mhm.
Anyway, so I'm still counseling people and supporting them on a one-on-one basis, and on occasion, facilitating discussions for organizations around topics like resilience. I gave a talk on resilience last week, for example. So I'm helping the community in those ways, kind of psychologically. And then I would also argue that the work that I've been doing with the Berkeley Habit Lab, which isn't a formal research lab, it's just the name of this thing that we're doing. It's a behavioral change program, and it's designed to help people reach goals that have been just barely out of their reach forever. Like, a lot of exercise goals, a lot of cessation or limitation of sugar. A lot of people are addicted to sugar.
Oh
Um,
my.
yeah, professional development goals that they have, or replacing Netflix with reading, is I thought, one of the more interesting ones. So helping the community in that way of either helping with interpersonal dynamics through executive coaching or strategy, or through how do we create the changes in our lives that we have really been wanting.
Indeed,
Yeah.
and I really resonate with that because sometimes all you need these support groups or accountability systems around you because it's information is not enough, right? And I do respect you understanding the limits of what you've done so far with your gang violence because there is a fine line between really caring about something and trying to make a difference to completely getting absorbed just for the sake of it, right? You want to understand that I did my part and I can move on to do other stuff that I feel like is really, really helping. And I really resonate with the no sugar thing because my God, Melissa, I've been trying for years and I have it worked out. I only have one sugar day per month. And that
All
one sugar,
right. Hey.
yeah, one white sugar day a month. I don't add any kind of added sugar. And that one sugar day a month is like, okay, do whatever you want, Ahad, because what is the max can you can do? How much can you eat in one day? You'll get tired of the sugar. And then and then you're done with it. But to be honest, this last one in December it got kind of out of hand. So this is the problem
Mhm.
with these things, right? Because you have a system in place and the system works really well. There's some stupid thing comes from outside and tries to break the system down. So what happened is that I have a new
Mhm.
daughter now in the house, right? So 5 months
Oh,
in.
congrats.
So yes, thank you so much. She's young. She is not at fault at all for what she's doing. She's being a
Yeah.
baby, right? She's being a baby,
Yeah.
but we're not equipped to be to be handling a baby out of nowhere, right? Like we were we were two individual contributors enjoying their lives to suddenly now being two parents who now have to take care of this little thing. So you can imagine the stress levels go up and down in the house. So because of that,
Yes.
sugar is the easiest outlet that you can get onto. So sometimes it you over binge every now and then. However, we've gotten back on track. This is my first week clean, nothing again, and I'm really feeling like myself again. Or else you would always
Good.
feel like
Good.
you feel disgusted. You just get up in the morning, have cereal, and then after that at lunch you'd go out and have a cookie. And I'm like, what am I doing? Because for me, when I eat sugar,
Mm.
that one day a month, it's like it's automatic that I go like eat whatever you want because it's only one day a month. But if
Yeah.
it goes more than one day a month, my mind stays the same. It's just like okay, just eat what how much you want. So it kind of goes out of hand really really quickly. It snowballs. Is what I'm saying. So that does happen. So anyways, I really really enjoy this, but I do want to talk a little bit more about this because as you know, we I got it confused in the start when we were talking offline that I really thought it was a
Mm.
research lab. So do talk
Sure.
to me a little
Mhm.
bit about more about this Berkeley Health Lab and the coaching and anything you do outside of academia. But I also want to learn a little bit more about academia as well. What I usually ask people is, okay, walk me through a day of Melissa's life. I don't talk to other people about this about Melissa's life. I'm saying as an
Yeah.
example that
I,
right. So
yeah.
walk me through a day in your academic life, and of course, I want to hear everything about the Berkeley Health Lab and anything related to speaking gigs and coaching gigs that you do.
Sounds great. Yeah. So I'll start with the academic side in that
Yeah.
case. So a day in the life of my academic self is really different depending on the month of the year. So when I'm teaching at Berkeley, it looks really different than when I'm teaching at the University of Bergen, which is in Norway. I hold a 20% faculty appointment there as well. And when I'm teaching UC Berkeley Study Abroad, which is just starting up in 2024, haven't done it yet, but have an idea of what that will look like. They all vary extremely from one another. So at Berkeley, my appointment at this point in time has shifted from when I first started there, where I'm now doing the teaching part time. And the class that I'm teaching at UC Berkeley most commonly is a professional development for budding psychologists. And in addition to that, I'm also the director of the UC Berkeley Psychology Postbaccalaureate program. And the postbac program is a year and a half to 2 year long program that is intended to retrain individuals who are interested in pursuing graduate work in psychology, but who have a background in something else. And so I have worked with people who were philosophy majors, or they are machine learning experts from whatever tech company, and they've decided, actually, I want to study psychology. This is what I want, or marketing, you name it. We've really worked with everybody. And so they come to me/Berkeley for a year and a half to 2 years, and they take the equivalent of an undergraduate degree, and they get a lot of research training, and they get mentorship from me, and they get professional development classes that I teach. So that's what I'm teaching most frequently at this point. But my other classes include developmental psychology, Psych 140. But the two that are like my bread and butter, the ones that I love the most, the ones that I'm excited to be teaching in Berlin and teach in Norway, and all of that, are a class on emerging adulthood, which is the ages of 18 to 28. And I think of it kind of secretly is, how do you use psychology to have a really good life as an individual? That's that one. And I pull from social psychology, developmental psychology, clinical psychology, counseling psychology. I pull from everything, and I picked like the highlights of those that would be most applicable to developing as an 18 to 28-year-old. Although I'd argue, we're works in progress forever. You could be 40 and take the class and you'll get something out of it, I guarantee you. And then the other class that I'm known for there and love teaching is one that I created called Love and Close Relationships. And Love and Close Relationships is a class that goes anywhere from looking at our early childhood relationships with our parents, and then how that kind of feeds into our friendships and our romantic partnerships. And I cover things like attachment theory and communication and conflict and how to get through it. And I love that class. And how I teach, or like my philosophy to teaching, is I think that I really specialize on the application of social psychology to real world life. I can rattle off theories all day long, but if you can't use that in your life to have a different experience, to see the world differently, to live a more compassionate or liberated existence, then I don't see much of a point in it. Then it's just kind of theory. So I really focus on that, which means that I have a lot of weird exercises I have people do in my classes in real time. Sometimes it makes people feel pretty uncomfortable. Like either they're learning a new skill set that they've never tried before and that feels uncomfortable, or they're sharing about themselves or invited to share about themselves. Never forced. We are a consent-based classroom, but they might be invited to share things that are like way more personal than you'd usually share in a class. And it's because we're really working on taking that information that various researchers have generated through their work and applying it to being like, now what? How do we use this? Like, let's build something interesting. Let's build an interesting life and existence. So that's kind of my niche. And so I teach that class in Norway for 2 months of the year. And a lot of Norwegian students take the class, but it's become kind of wildly popular with students who are on exchange in Norway. So my classroom is, in that particular setting is about 80 people deep. It can be up to 150 at Berkeley, so it kind of depends. But 80 people deep in Norway, and it's a lot of people from all over Europe, and Norwegian students as well. Yeah.
Oh, that's so much to unpack, because what you're speaking is basically it's calling out to me, because that is the space that I'm the most interested in, right? Personal development, professional development, emerging adulthood. I was very sad to hear that you capped at 28, because I was like, okay, I missed my chance to living a good life. But then you were like, okay, no, a
Nope.
40-year-old can also
You
take
have
it.
not. Yeah.
That's good. That's exciting. But yeah, I really, really resonate with all of that, because that's exactly what gives me energy to talk and discuss, and one of the reasons this project exists is because of having that vulnerability and that discussions with people. I'm very curious to hear some of your exercises, because I also facilitate here and there. So I also take some activities from research, psychology based research. Like recently, this Harvard professor came up with something called the spectrum of failure, in which you
Mm.
move from blameability to blameworthy to praiseworthy failures. And that's the exercise we just did
Mm.
at my job, to explain to them that, okay, guys, it's not your fault. It's not your fault.
Mm.
It's the system's fault. So let's figure
Mm.
that out. Is it the system's fault or not? And it was wonderful to see some people actively saying that, no, we are deviant individuals. We are doing this on purpose, knowing that the system is working fine. To people who were like, yeah, no, the system doesn't work fine. We're doing our best. And it's a very liberating experience. So I would like to hear some activities, mostly because I can steal them for my things later on. But I'm really curious to hear some activities that you've conducted in your classrooms that you're willing to share.
Sure. Yeah, so one that comes to mind as being something that is really useful, not just in the classroom within the context of my love and close relationship class, but also I have done this with people in organizations a lot. So one that might be a fun one is I like to talk with organizations where the teams are kind of in trouble, where like people are fighting and they're not being really kind or polite or talking directly or using proper conflict resolution skills. They're just kind of being a little teenager-y, about a little underdeveloped in their approach, right? So what I like to do is start out by discussing with them the Cartman drama triangle, which comes from kind of the theories around codependency and addiction treatment. But the Cartman drama triangle basically suggests that when people are perpetuating conflict, they tend to tell their stories in such a way that they occupy, and the other people in the story occupy, one of three categorical roles. They're either the victim, the villain, or the savior. or the victim, the perpetrator, and the hero, whichever, but you get the point, right? And you'll often find that when a tech team isn't getting along, whoever's telling the story is often either the hero or the victim. They're never the villain in the story, right? But someone did something wrong, or like the boss sucks, or like who said this OKR, whatever. They're mad, right? That's the villain. And then whoever's impacted is, of course, the victim. And then whoever is like potentially able to save the day, that's, going to be the hero role. So I started out by describing this and then having people identify in themselves times when they've applied this. I have them tell stories of things that have stressed them out, and they're almost always using this kind of triangulation pattern, which is really unhealthy. It doesn't lead anyone to any solutions. It's more of like victimizing themselves and disempowering themselves, and like a reduction of responsibility, right? It's really problematic. So I have them start with that, and then I teach them an alternative. Like, here's another way to do it that is better. We should be employing something like nonviolent communication. Nonviolent communication comes from the work of a guy named Marshall Rosenberg, and I would argue that it's a great starting place for communication of difficult information. It's not the end all be all. I've got my own criticisms and limitations of it that I can talk about some other time, but just kind of starting out with it, this is a great basic model, and it has 4 components to it. The first component is observations. The second is feelings. The third is needs. And the fourth is requests. Feelings can be a little bit sensitive in the workplace, so we can kind of like dotted line strike that one out for now. But the idea is that, following through with the other ones, you might have an observation, which is your version of the story of things that are objectively true. So it can't be like, Ahad, you didn't do what you're supposed to do, or like, you threw me under the bus with the boss. Okay, we're colleagues. You threw me under the bus with the boss. Like, unless that's literal, where you threw me under a bus, it's otherwise a real subjective story, right? As opposed to, Ahad, when we had that meeting and the boss asked, did anyone on the team complete the task? And you said, we didn't, but it's Melissa's fault. She didn't do this other thing first, right? So observation, when this objective truth that can be observable happened, it led to the following impact, right? It made me feel embarrassed. It made me feel angry. It really, it caused me to fear that there's a reduction in trust in me, or it makes me feel like we're not on the same team, right? And then need. I love to feel like we're on the same team here, or I'd love to feel like I have space to mess up every once in a while. Therefore, my request is, next time, instead of like bringing it up at the boss's meeting, if you can tell that I'm missing something, could you please just like, send me a Slack and let me know that I missed something? That would be so helpful to me, right? Instead of like, Ahad, I can't believe you said that. You threw me under the bus. How dare you? Buzz off, right?
Yeah.
Many things, right? So by breaking it down to like observations, making sure you're telling the story in the least biased way, right? Like, it's objectively true that you said that thing, or you didn't say that thing, or that you did the project or you didn't do the project. It's not objectively true that you threw me under the bus or that you were a jerk, right? Those are judgments. They're not observations. So if we can get people to kind of shift how they tell their stories, it's going to produce more cohesion, more collaboration, more flexibility and freedom to have errors if you have them. And it's going to maintain our relationship. I'm like, hey, just let me know when I mess up. Great. Now we have a solution. Yeah. And so how do I make that into an exercise is, if you've ever played those board games that involve, like the game Taboo, it gives you this little buzzer where like if the person says the wrong thing, you get to buzz and be like, Bzz. Okay. So I bought like a dozen of these buzzers, and I have people buddy up with a partner and tell a story about something that they're actually pissed off about, right? Like a conflict that they're having in their life, or a frustration they have with their dog. I don't care, whatever it is. And so there's one person who's telling the story, and the other one is trying to point out judgmental language or subjective language in how they're telling the story. And when they hear it, they get to use the buzzer. So it's just a room filled with angry people pushing buzzers
I
on each
love
other
it.
until they get to a place of being able to tell a story in a balanced, cohesive, non-blamey, retro kind of way. Anyway, so that's one that you could take. They like the buzzers. It'll be a hit.
Oh, it's a wonderful story. Two things happened here. One, that I've heard about this concept. in a book I read, it was about how when you're arguing with a loved one, it was about loved ones' communications. That there's, think of it like a tennis court, right? And you're on one side, that is your truth, and then they're on the other side, that is their truth, and the net is the observation, the real truth. And
Oh,
to play the
wow.
game of tennis, you need to accept all three truths. You need to accept her truth, which is the
Mm,
judgments. You need to accept your truth, which are your judgments. But you also need to accept the
mm-hmm,
observations, the objective
mm-hmm,
truth. Okay, you
mm-hmm.
did not pick up the plates yesterday. That made me feel angry. Instead of saying you're sloppy, you don't do anything, you did not pick up the
Right,
plates, right? So that was very
right.
interesting when you're mentioning. I was pretty stoked that I know some stuff that a
Yeah.
academic professor knows. But secondly, I listen to a lot of podcasts of a lot of psychologists, economists, and everything, of course. So whenever I listen to them, the psychologists on their, or like any academic, like on the whim, start quoting people like, oh, this was research but done by
Mm,
this. So right now that
mm,
happened real time, and you have no
yeah.
idea how stoked I was when it was happening. I was like, oh my god, this is a real academic who's
Mm,
really quoting on
mm.
the fly, and I get to be here to experience it. So it was really like a fanboy moment for me. So just wanted to point point
Oh.
that out. I really enjoyed it. But we are getting slowly towards the end of our conversation. So I can go on for hours. I think you have winter holidays, so you can also go on for hours, but we need to wrap this up slowly. So you're doing academic stuff. You told us a lot of wonderful stories about it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Berkeley Health Lab and what where we can find you, what it is, who is it for, what kind of thing. And I want to end the conversation with some really nice tips. Could be based on communication, could be based on self-development, based on your psychology research that you think our listeners would be better off listening. So I think this would be a nice way to close the conversation.
Sounds great. I'll try and keep it short. Academics, we tend to lecture. I know we're people who tell stories and lecture for a living, so we take up a lot of time and space when we talk. So I will try and keep it more concise. Yeah.
Mhm.
So the Berkeley Habit Lab. The Berkeley Habit Lab is a project that I started with a friend and colleague of mine. This friend happens to not come from the world of psychology. He is a fintech CFO type,
Oh, not a
but
professor, not a
we
professor. I'm
no,
shocked.
and we met in the context of counseling school.
Ah,
So he's got some psychology chops. He elected to go to counseling, to learn counseling skills, and that's the context through which I met him. And we just get along well and all that. And that being said, what's really true is we decided that we wanted to start a project together, because we get along so well. And so he contacted me and said, Missa, we're such good friends. We get along so well. We should start a project. What should it be? And he said, let's talk on Thursday and think of some ideas. And so I thought about it. And then we had our meeting on Thursday. And I said, I want to tell you a story about a client, an executive client of mine. This executive coaching client of mine is a machine learning genius, AI genius, machine learning genius, CEO of a tech company, and extremely proficient in almost every area of his life. I mean, just one of the smartest people, many standards of deviation above the mean in terms of IQ. And yet, he was having some trouble with some basic self-care stuff. Nothing super tragic, but things like, remember to call your parents, remember to eat in the morning, remember to go work out, those sorts of things. And I was kind of playing around with this client, and I was like, I said, I wish I could just like be there every day. And then whenever you don't do your morning routine, if I could just like zing you and like charge you money, because, behaviorists, that area of psychology would suggest that people's behavior is shaped through rewards and punishments.
yeah.
But the problem is, when it comes to things like eating sugar or working out or not working out, is that there are no punishments, and the rewards are, well, there are, right? There are punishments,
Too long
but
term.
both the punishments
Too
and the
long
reward,
term.
they're really far away, right? They're
Yeah.
really far away. So if like you binge on sugar today, like if you do that every day, that's not good, right? But like you're not going to have that big of a consequence, right? So it's really hard with these sticking points like exercise, like, whatever, sugar consumption, etc. It's hard for us to maintain those because like we don't get punished that hard when we mess up, and we don't get rewarded hardly at all when we do it right. So like who cares, kind of. And we might actually feel rewarded by the behavior, right? Like I like to sleep in, I like to like eat sugar, it feels good.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so this CEO person that I was working with, I told him this, and we decided to try it. So we went on this program where I told him basically that he's going to send me a text message by 11 o'clock every day and let me know that he did those things. And if not, I'm going to charge him money. Now, he went from basically zero compliance to 99, 98 point something. I can't remember if it ran to 99 or 98, right? But 98% plus compliance just with the threat of me noticing and charging him.
The threat of
Now, this guy,
accountability, right? Basically.
yeah, yeah. And it's like, it's not the money, right? It's about having to admit to me that he didn't do it.
Yeah.
So I told this story to my partner at the Berkeley Habit Lab, Aviad, and I said, I want to create something like that. I want to create a more, rounded out systemic approach to helping people reach their goals that applies all of the behavioral economic stuff that we can find, like all the behavioral change, habit changing information. Let's create a thorough system to help people finally reach that thing that they have, that's been so evasive to them. And so we started that in March, I think March of this year. And we ran a big pilot study, which is not a research study to be published, but like a pilot study to see if what we had created worked. And again, we found tremendous results. So it's been over 98% effective for all of our pilot participants and the clients that we've had since. The clients that we currently have, everyone is on a 100% success rate. All of our current clients are
Wow.
on that. So
Wow.
but the holidays are coming. So we'll
That
see
should
if
be
they can
allowed.
keep it
Well,
up.
that should be allowed a little bit here and there. I'm speaking for those people. I know that this thing will things will happen. So,
Yeah.
but
Well, it depends if they think it should be allowed. So a lot of it, I don't have specific goals around, like, I don't need people to give up sugar. I don't need them to exercise every day necessarily, but I do want to help people get unstuck and have the lives that most resemble what they're aiming for. And so that's what this project is. It's been super fun. It's extremely satisfying when people
yeah,
win, which is kind of constantly. And basically, it's an accountability program and a kind of a thorough coaching of, like, how do we look at what you're trying to achieve and give you actionable steps.
yeah.
So yeah, it's great and fun.
Oh,
We love it.
I really enjoyed it because I resonate with it so much. This is a saying that I heard during my coaching program. It's called, if information was the saying was, if information is enough, then all of us would be rich, healthy, and fit. Right?
Right.
It's all there. It's all out there,
hmm
but it's not
hmm
enough, and that's why the concept of accountability and coaching exists, because that's just not enough. People will mess up. They will turn out. I really like unstuck. You want to make them unstuck, basically, right? And that, I think
hmm
that's a wonderful idea, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I think we are running out of time, so I would rather close this up now. So before we go, I had something, but I lost my train of thought. It was about something you said. But before we go, anything else you want to add to this conversation, Melissa?
Yeah, I want to give you a habit changing tip because
Okay.
you asked for tips and this is a
Yeah.
fast one. Okay. So say that you're trying to achieve a goal like exercising or giving up sugar, whatever it is. That's already hard to do, right? If it weren't hard to do, you would have already done it by now, right?
Yeah.
So something that will help you achieve that goal is if you can very clearly and in advance of when you're trying to achieve it, operationalize the goal. Spell out to yourself what it is you're going to do, when you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, what equipment you need to do it. I'm just thinking of exercise as an example, right? Like, what soundscape do you need to do it? What childcare needs do you have in order to do it? And making a plan around that and documenting it. So it's not like, oh, I want to be healthier. It's like, no, I am a person who does a yoga
Smart
video
goal.
three
Yeah.
times a
Yeah.
week on these days, right? Yeah, you need to make it a SMART goal.
Yeah.
And then you need to take it one step further by identifying what are the most likely things that are going to become hurdles or stumbling blocks. For almost everyone, it's travel. That's what we
Yeah.
found the Berkeley Habit Lab. The time when they might get close to missing it or something is travel. So make a plan in advance of what happens if my kid gets sick, what happens if I'm going to travel, and then create an alternative pathway where you still get to win. So what we're
Yeah.
trying to do is separate the execution of the goal from the goal itself,
Yeah.
right? We want to do the planning, get the cognitive load off of you, and then when it comes time to just execute on the goal, you
Yeah.
just have to do the instructions that you've
It's
created.
operational then. Yeah. Exactly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, I love that advice. I think that's one of the key things. You need to get your, basically, this beautiful thing in your head is the reason you're you, but it's also the reason you're not happy with who you are to an extent. So you have to silence it a little bit sometimes to get it going, and operationalizing it or automating it, I believe, always works really well. But Thank you so
Yeah,
much, Melissa, for your time. I really, really enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it. And I would love to talk more about this later on if you ever get a chance. But I think it's been a wonderful night. It's almost 11 o'clock here, so I feel like we have we have some time. It's almost midday there. You guys, you also want to think lunch maybe. So we will call it
I
a day here. Thank you so much for having me. I hope you had fun, and thank you for everyone
had a blast.
listening to this conversation. I hope you learned a little bit today that you didn't learn yesterday. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. If you haven't already, do check out the roundtable. We are live with our first session already, and we are looking for the upcoming quarter participants. So if you think you want an accountability group where you come in and get shit done, roundtable is the place to be. So sign up using the link below, and I'll see you there. Thank you so much.